This fall is going to be crazy. Now, I'm not talking about crazy as in how many fans are going to be in the stands, or crazy as in someone's going to be playing ball on this coast and over on that coast they're not going to be playing ball. I'm talking about how crazy just the world of recruiting may be. Now, some of you, I was talking to someone just last night who said, I like the more broad-based points about college football. I like watching the games on Saturday, but I'm not a huge recruiting fan. Well, some of you feel that way. Others, the more diehard types, you really do care about recruiting. But here's the thing. We talk recruiting some on this show. 24/7 Sports is a recruiting company. But when we talk about recruiting on this show, we're not breaking down film of a kid from West Virginia. What I'm talking about is how this is going to relate to you, even if you're just a casual fan. So here's what you need to watch for, because a lot of stuff's happening right now. A whole lot of things are moving simultaneously. Some you see above the surface, some you don't necessarily see, but a lot of people in the college football world and the recruiting industry, they do see it. Your current top 10 per the 24/7 Sports team recruiting rankings: Ohio State, Tennessee, North Carolina, Clemson, USC, Florida, Minnesota, Texas, Iowa, Notre Dame. As I told you, and as I'll continue to tell you, this is as fluid a situation as we've ever seen. And that's in a world where already fluidity is the name of the game when you're talking recruiting rankings in May, because these aren't final until February of next year. But those are the current 24/7 Sports team recruiting rankings. If you watch Late Kick, you know we've talked about Tennessee a lot. Auburn, again, has had a big weekend, landed a big quarterback commitment today. So I'm not going to waste time on any specific commits, like Oklahoma got Mario Williams, verbal from him this last weekend. More on Oklahoma in a little while. But think about this, okay? There's some stuff we don't know, some stuff we do know. But here's what's universal. Talking to head coaches, talking to a lot of assistants, and talking to a lot of people who work for us here, but who constantly have their ear to the ground nationally. Universally, it is expected that this fall will be the wildest ending to a recruiting cycle in history, perhaps, because there's not been a situation that has led to a chain of events unfolding like they have, such as what we've seen with COVID-19 and whatnot. So if you're unfamiliar, let me just quickly tell you why this is happening, why it will happen the way that we're talking here. Bud Elliott and the guys on the national editorial team put out a piece that we kind of chronicled and detailed on this show a couple of weeks ago. I think it was first week of May. And as of that date, I think the day was May 6th. As of May 6th, and I'm sure these numbers haven't changed a whole lot, there were 3 times the number of commitments on that date as there were year over year that date 1 year earlier. Right now, there are more kids committed in this recruiting cycle than there were at this point the last 2 years combined. So why is that happening? Well, they're happening for a few reasons. That goes to the what we know category. What we know is, and here's how we know this, because we get a lot of feedback. There have been a lot of reactionary commitments. Okay, so some kids started to commit, and that's normal for May. Keep in mind, with the new recruiting calendar and the early signing date, there were a lot of kids the last 2 cycles that committed in the May and June timeframe. Georgia, for example, had a huge May and June this last year. So that's not atypical. But here's what happened. What happened was that those sequence of events started, those dominoes started to fall, and then because coaches were not coaching in spring and they were not on the field, all they had time to do was recruit, recruit, recruit. And all kids were doing was sitting in their houses. So all they had time to do all day was field calls, field calls. Well, some kids started to feel pressure. And they also started to buy into the idea that, hey, if you want a spot now, we got one for you at the moment. I can't guarantee we're going to have one for you in November. And as a result, a lot of chain reaction commitments, reactionary commitments started to happen. Obviously, not all of those are going to stick. More on that in just a second. There were offers without camps. A lot of times, we're going to play you a little snippet of our Nick Saban interview later in the show. Schools like Ohio State, schools like Alabama, and to varying degrees how they operate here, but a lot of times when you're at the top of the food chain, these programs don't like extending committable offers without getting you in camp. They can watch your huddle film, they can watch all the cut-ups that you send, but they really want to put their eyes on you in a controlled setting so that they can see you go through the drills. It's like an NFL private workout after the combine, but before the draft, when you do your private workouts, it's the same way that these camps work. So you don't have that in a lot of cases, and therefore you have some offers going out without the due diligence that normally would have happened. You've got offers going out with incomplete evaluations relative to what you normally would have. You know, like Tennessee and Jeremy Pruitt right now, they've got, I think, 21 or 22 verbal commits. And I don't, listen, Jeremy Pruitt's the last guy in the world I would ever question when it comes to evaluating talent. But think about this, just on a spectrum of what's normal versus right now, even Jeremy Pruitt doesn't have all the information available in his evaluation portfolio of a prospect relative to what he'd normally have. It's impossible. By default, it's impossible. So he's watched as much film as he can watch of a kid, but he hadn't got him in camp any more than anyone else has been able to. So my point is, in some cases, you've got kids who have entered into a situation that they're maybe not totally committed to. In other cases, you may have programs that have taken commitments from kids that they're not totally committed to. You've also got kids, you'd be shocked right now at how many kids have committed without taking official visits. I'll go a step further. You would be shocked at how many kids have committed to schools sight unseen. They've never even set foot on campus. All that's happening right now. So what does that sound like a recipe for? It sounds like a recipe for a tidal wave, a tsunami, if you will, of decommitments this fall. Visits are going to matter. A lot of these major commitments have not taken visits. If you're committed right now, I mean, let me just ask you something. If you're watching the YouTube version, we were looking at Clay Helton. USC's ranked, what are they, 5th right now. So let's just use, because he happened to be on the screen, Southern Cal. If you're committed to Southern Cal, and let's say you live in Johnson City, Tennessee. This is a hypothetical recruit, of course. And you have not taken your visits. And you're lining up visits in the fall to Southern Cal, Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, and Clemson. Like, am I even supposed to count you as a commitment? Everything's going to be telling you stay close to home. You're going to see things you've never seen before at these programs. You're going to see immaculate facilities. You're going to walk into multiple organizations that have won recent national championships. Everything you could want and then some, they have. I'm not just talking about the lower tier kids, the ones that maybe aren't at the forefront, not at the center of the major recruiting arguments. I'm not talking about just high 2-star, low 3-star type kids. I'm talking about the cream of the crop. In some cases, are going to take visits this fall and decommit. Now, here's what I want you to remember. On top of the F word, fluid, I also want you to think about this. If I was talking to Colin early before the show, I said, I think I just came up with a new term. What I didn't tell Colin is where I came up with the term from. Colin and I talk movies a lot before the show. So there's this movie called Lake Placid, cinematic masterpiece, Colin. It's about an evil crocodile that just hunts people up on a lake. I mean, in fairness, it was his lake, and Bill Pullman and Bridget Fonda and the like come up there and disrupt him. I digress. I learned from that movie, from Bill Pullman, who was, I think, a park ranger. I learned from him what a keystone species is. A keystone species, as far as Bill Pullman described it in Lake Placid, is a species that whatever they do, it affects the entire ecosystem. So I was just scratching out some final notes in the break room in here, and I thought about keystone recruiting moves, keystone offers. Alabama right now is ranked 41st, I want to say, in the team recruiting rankings. Now, to steal that old Vern Lundquist adage, there are a few truths in an uncertain world, but one of them is certainly Alabama's not going to finish 41st in recruiting. They only have 4 or 5 verbal commits right now. Again, I talked to Nick Saban about that. You'll hear that full interview tomorrow. But what's going to happen is they're going to make moves late. Clemson is going to make moves late. A bunch of major programs, tier 1 programs, are going to make moves late. And they're going to take kids who are committed to other programs. This happens every year. It's especially going to happen in this cycle. Those are going to be what I call keystone moves, keystone chess pieces in recruiting. It's kind of like when Nick Saban, since he's on the screen right now, it's kind of like when they hire a new coach. There's a domino effect. It's a ripple effect that affects the entire sport because they can pretty much go get whoever they want to, by and large, and you sit there and chuckle until you realize, ooh, they just took the defensive coordinator from FSU. Well, now I'm a Louisiana Monroe fan, and now they're going to take my head coach as coordinator. Well, that's the same way it's going to work in recruiting. Like, Auburn, for all you know, could take a quarterback, or took a quarterback today. They could take a corner prospect who was previously committed to Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State's got a late slot to fill, so they grab one who was committed to Tulsa. Tulsa takes one who otherwise would have gone to an FCS program. That stuff happens every cycle. That's not a new concept. It's just going to happen en masse this fall, and it's going to be happening right during the middle of, hopefully, a football season. So you're going to have football to watch, and then the Monday through Friday is going to be as busy as recruiting has ever been. And this is already a world in which a lot of you are rabid, diehard recruiting fans. I'm just telling you, this particular cycle, it's not just going to be the diehards who are captivated by this stuff. Everybody, if you're even just a casual drive-by college football fan, this is really going to pique your interest this fall.